Right, before I start this review, I have a confession to make. I actually didn't see the first Black Panther, but due to the things I've seen and read about it, I reckon it was about 90 minutes of something like this.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all. I'm blickety black, blacker than black, black.
I found the internet buzz around it mostly off-putting, and around that time Disney had just acquired Marvel, and for me personally it's a red flag. While I found Disney's whole "how do you do fellow blacks" routine amusing, it didn't make me want to see the film. A couple of experiences helped with this too. Some kids at my dance class were saying that people were handing out bottles of Supermalt at the cinema they went to. Later at that dance class, the teacher incorporated the Wakanda Forever arm thingy into one of the dance moves. No, I don't go to that class anymore. Oh, also I was told on Facebook that by not seeing it, I was letting down black people. And no, I no longer use Facebook. See, around this time, I used to have an undercut, so I'd go to the local barbers to get it freshened up, and one time I went in there, right? And the barber was telling me about this documentary he watched about Wakanda being based on a real place, and he actually thought it was legit. And I questioned him about the implication of this, but ultimately the conversation just devolved into, it's good for my black kids to see black superheroes because black.
Blickety black, blacker than black, black, I'm blacker than black, yo, because I'm black and I'm back.
It was then that I made the definite decision to start growing my hair out. Oh, and never to see Black Panther. Now, if my little rule of 3 storytime routine isn't your kind of thing, I'll give you the short version. See, I feel about Black Panther how Sargon feels about Jess Phillips. I wouldn't even torrent it. This is an ongoing joke in my home where whenever Husbando and I would try to make a plan for absolutely anything, his first suggestion would be to watch Black Panther. I tell him to piss off and threaten divorce. It's all very hilarious. Also, based on how I've seen people react to this film, the conspiracy theorist in me low-key thinks that if I watch it, it'll turn into a demon headmaster sort of situation where I'll just think I'm watching a movie, but it'll rewire my brain using certain suggestion and make me retarded and forget that Wesley Snipes starred in 3 Blade movies 20 years ago. So now I bet you're wondering why I watched Wakanda Forever. Well, I lost the bet. And I didn't realize just how big of an L this was until I saw that the runtime is almost 3 hours. And you know, despite all of this, I decided to go in as neutral as possible, but I'm gonna admit that probably isn't saying a lot. Anyway, Black Panther and the Multiverse of Grief starts with a lovely montage of Chadwick Boseman, which I thought was really heartwarming. However, my heart grew cold again as soon as the film starts with them killing T'Challa off screen. As if this didn't lack dignity enough, yeah? They have this AI tracking his heartbeat simply forget to inform Princess when T'Challa died, so Queen had to come in and announce his death. She literally walks in and says, T'Challa's now with the ancestors, and I had to stifle my laugh so hard in the cinema that I nearly ruptured a spleen. And then, at the funeral, they start bogling. They whack T'Challa into a coffin that looks like a skin and up tin from Camden Market, and then they just yeet the nigga into space. So he seemingly has no resting place now. So much for closure. Cause now all I can picture is him forever floating around in space, riding the ghost whip in a Tesla. And I don't know about the whole of Africa, obviously, but people there tend to be spiritual, and having your dead not having a resting place is just something that doesn't really correlate for me, especially when you consider the culture. But if I'm wrong, by all means, please tell me in the comments. So it's a year later and the Queen rocks up to the UN, looking like Cersei Lannister after her son, you know. To undo the work that T'Challa did at the end of the last movie and tells everyone that they won't be sharing the vibranium with anyone because they don't want Whitey to have it or something. You know, I love how the writers had to literally erase the rest of the world to make the scene work. Hey, you know who's very prominent in the UN that's not white?
China!
But I guess in the MCU, the UN is a thing, but China isn't. There's a raid scene at some Wakanda outreach place that's not in Wakanda. Well, I assume it's not in Wakanda because there's an ethnofield around it, so you can't raid it, right? So it's got to be some other part of Africa. And that's pretty cheeky, innit? That after years of closing themselves off to the rest of the continent, they can just head wherever and build facilities just to do stuff with the vibranium stash they're not sharing. So what's the outreach exactly? Reaching out to pull the other crabs down in the bucket. So anyway, some white dudes break in to steal vibranium, but they were caught by the lady warriors and they were brought back to the UN to kneel. And then the Queen was all, see, I told you whiteys you were trouble. Well, She said it in a more royal way, but you get the gist. There's another scene later at the UN where Whitey threatens to take the vibranium by force, and this is the last time I'll mention the whole thing about the UN because nothing comes of it. Somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, some other Whiteys have located some vibranium and they decide to go and investigate and dig some up. The team going to retrieve the vibranium get killed by a mysterious entity, and the rest of the team on a research boat get killed by some sea people. My suspension of disbelief was enough to appreciate parts of this scene, like the siren song. It was kind of cute. It's Marvel, why not? But it wasn't enough to not wonder why the rest of the film had to happen if they had this power. I mean, I guess it's not much of an issue if you've got some earplugs and a gun, but still. Anyway, it's the 1-year death anniversary and Queen takes Princess camping at some lake to talk about feelings. Loveless randomly shows up with his pigeon wing ankles and interrupts their heart-to-heart conversation to introduce himself. Now, apparently, the ankle wings are faithful to the comic, implying the writers had the ability to stay true to the source material, but they decided to keep the dumbest thing about him. If you're watching this as a true comic fan, apologies, but I don't get why you would grow pigeon wings on your ankles if you live under the ocean. Now listen, I'm just a normie who hasn't read the comic, and the film doesn't really explain it, so it just looks silly to me. Also, the way he introduces himself is a bit weird as well, innit?
Who are you?
I have many names. My people call me Akukunkan. But my enemies call me Namor.
I have many names. My people call me Harriet Tubman, but my enemies call me Nick. And then for the rest of the film, everyone just calls him Namor or Namor, depending on who you're talking to. It's weird. Also, where in Africa is Wakanda? I mean, I know I didn't see the first film, but even I know that Wakanda is located in Central Africa, so they're miles from the ocean, right? But I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would love to see the route that Loveless took. You see, I find this particularly interesting in the film because later in the film there's a whale attack in Wakanda, and can seawater creatures survive in freshwater? Because I remember a while ago when a baby whale got stuck in the Thames and it had to be put down because it was suffering so much. I mean, in fairness, it could have been suffering from all the city boy cocaine piss. But I digress. After the intro, he proceeds to tell Queen and Princess that he too is from an ethno-state, only this time it's in the ocean, and Whitey's been sniffing around his vibranium. So can Wakanda do him a solid and kidnap the scientist who invented the vibranium detector so they can murder her? Some things happen, causing Warrior Lady and Princess to go to America to find the scientist, and on their way, they meet up with their favorite colonizer for help. You know, Wakandan calling white people colonizers as an insult is a bit... It doesn't make sense in universe. They really need to knock that off.
Racism, knock it off. Bigotry, knock it off.
Also, Martin Freeman looks a bit off. I mean, it looks like him from a distance, but if you really look at his face, he starts to look like someone else. You know, like when you try to read in your dreams and then the letters go all funny when you try to focus on it. It's unnerving, but the movie's actually inserted dialogue that says that he looks good, so I'm probably wrong. Princess and Lady Warrior eventually find the scientist at MIT. Apparently she's Iron Man's replacement, and the first time we meet her, she's using her super intelligence to extort some dude. What a role model. Warrior Lady decides she likes Girl Genius for some reason, and they decide to not hand her in to Loveless Pigeon Ankles. This girl scientist is so intelligent, you guys. Like, she was able to make a vibranium detector as a school project, and it works, despite the US having no vibranium to test it on. And... she manages to sell it to the CIA. I mean, it's really lucky that it worked. And she built it in a couple of months too. What a genius.
Genius.
Apparently she built her first machine at the age of 3 when her dad, who's a mechanic, just let her loose with his tools. Oh my God, was this her dad? Her dad's no longer in her life though, so I assume he's in prison for child endangerment. Or he's pretending to be dead, but is actually chilling on a secret island with Elvis and Michael Jackson. The FBI suddenly catches up with them and a chase ensues through the most empty city I've ever seen, but I think it was filmed during COVID, so, you know, we'll let that one go. Oh, and Girl Genius has built an Iron Man suit because she's a genius. This suit is so great that it can fly up to space and shoot down a drone and have it land on some policemen who are just doing their job. There's one for the ACAB crew. You know, looking at the suit, you can see that what she allegedly has in intelligence, she seriously lacks in style. Really, what I'm trying to say is, the suit is fugly. They could have done anything in the world, but this is what we got. Why not use the suit as a connection to a backstory and have it made out of vintage car parts so it looks cool but handmade? They had a chance to do something really awesome, like Howl's Moving Castle, but ultimately they ended up with a toy from Jingle All the Way. Anyway, during the chase scene, the sea people rock up and they kidnap the princess and girl genius and take them to the bottom of the ocean. So now, Loveless has the upper hand and could have killed girl genius and used princess as leverage, but they feed and clothe them instead because apparently the film needed to continue for another 2 hours. Lady Warrior gets fired for losing princess and Queen seems particularly hostile, and I don't understand why she doesn't just let Warrior fix her mistake. But apparently, it had to happen this way because now they can put T'Challa's girlfriend in the film and make her go get the princess instead. But for some reason, they don't tell us she lives in Haiti now. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the ocean, Loveless is trying to make friends with Princess by telling her his entire life story. And apparently he got his name from a conquistador, so he decided he's going to take it back and make it his own. And as we all know, taking the name an oppressor gave you and making it your own by calling yourself it is peak empowerment. Anyway, he's a special boy because his mom was coerced into freebasing vibranium while she was pregnant with him. How did that happen? I bet you're wondering. Well, some ancestor found some vibranium glowing at the bottom of the sea, and his first thought was, let's dig it up and make some scissor. Anyway, Loveless is telling Princess that they should band together against the white colonizing conquistadors because they're both brown and colonized. I'd like to take this opportunity and remind everyone that Wakanda stood by and watched from behind an ethnofield while the rest of Africa got pillaged. Wakanda was never colonized, and for them to call anybody a colonizer is like the pot calling the kettle African American. Sometime later, T'Challa's girlfriend somehow gets into the underwater jail and rescues Princess and Girl Genius.
Super easy, barely an inconvenience.
During the escape, T'Challa's girlfriend actually shoots a slave girl and kills her, but she wasn't on the good side anyway, so it's fine. It's fine. Well, it's not fine because this pisses off Loveless and they flood Wakanda as retaliation. During this attack, the Queen dies, saving Girl Genius, and Loveless says that he's going to be back next week with his whale. After a quickie funeral for the Queen, Princess actually realizes that the bracelet that Loveless gave her while she was in the water jail actually has vibranium in it, so now she has the secret ingredient MacGuffin to become Black Panther. So now they're able to take the fight to Loveless before he comes back to do any more damage in Wakanda. So now they have a Black Panther and a plan to defeat Loveless. What's the plan? Well, they're gonna hang him out to dry or something. Something like that. So anyway, the Wakandans get in their submarine and head to the ocean to ambush Loveless. There's a big fight scene on the boat, and I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but when there's too much CGI in something, for me, it starts to look like a primary school play. You're super aware that nothing is real, and it's really jarring and not nice on the eyes. And if anything should be nice on the eyes, it should be movies, but not women. Actually, one thing did stand out to me in the battle, and that was when the last man in Wakanda gets punched by Loveless. The punch shatters his armor and sends him flying across the boat. Now, unless my man had vibranium bones, there's no way he would have been able to shake that off the way he did. At the very least, he would have been quadrospasmed.
Medics say he may live, but only with his neck as an internal organ.
I actually expected this dude to die at some point in the film because he's a man, and as a character, I actually kind of thought it was alright. So consider my expectations subverted, right? Princess has a big fight with Loveless and wins. She doesn't kill him though. She just kind of stands over him for a bit like, come on man, we've both got dead moms man, let's stop this.
War is bad, leave it in the past.
At this point, I can't remember if Princess lets Loveless go or if he escapes. I think at this point my brain was just trying to purge the movie. But you know, Loveless goes back to the sea, happy to be an ally for Wakanda, and Wakanda presumably take the blame for all the people that Loveless and his people murked, and they just go back to doing Wakanda shit. Other things happen in the film, but they're either inconsequential or my brain refuses to really go into them, like the Chekhov's spear tips that were never fired, or the Chekhov's UN that was never fired, or even the Chekhov's colonizer who committed acts of espionage that was never fired. There were so many things like that. I could go into it, but I don't need this video to be a Snyder cut. Actually, there's just one more thing. The mid-credit sequence. To make my point, I'm going to go through this scene from the perspective of the princess. So bear with me and imagine with me that you're the princess. Me, 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 me. What are those? What are those? Okay, so you're the princess. Your brother dies. Then a year later, your mom gets the old Disney one too. And then your brother's girlfriend rocks up with a 5-year-old and says that he's your nephew. And you ask her if your mom knew this before she died, and it turns out she did. So it looks as though your entire family kept a secret from you for no particular reason. I mean, you can air your feelings with your brother's baby mama, but really the people you can talk to about this to really get some closure are dead. Now, for the rest of your life, when you look at your nephew's face, you'll see a living, growing, malignant tumor of a reminder of the secret your whole family kept from you for half a decade. And scene. I don't know about you guys, but that would make me feel some type of way. Maybe Princess is a lot more forgiving than I am, but I mean, earlier in the film, she was saying that she wanted to burn down the world, but maybe she's transcended all that. Now, would I have changed the movie in any way? Yes. How? How would I do that? Well, personally, I'd go back in time to when the writers were born and just shove them back up their mothers. But since that's not possible, I think it might have been nice if they didn't turn T'Challa into a selfish jerk and have him at least write a letter for the princess that explains everything. He could have left her this box that throughout the film she was unable to open because of her inner turmoil. And throughout the film, she learns to open her heart and maybe learns to forgive. Then, as she's sat at the beach, she has this box in front of her and she's finally ready to open it. And we don't need to know what's in there because, frankly, it's none of our business. But we can look at her face and see this feeling of peace just wash over her. Then T'Challa's girlfriend and her son can come over. We can see it's the first time the princess has met the son, but she can look at him and say, "Hello, nephew," implying that she knows already. Then they sit on the beach and watch the sunset and just be in each other's presence. And then, all of a sudden, a drum machine and a DJ stand rises up from the sand, and then Princess turns to her nephew and says,
Sorry that your daddy died.
But in all seriousness, I would have held off on a second Black Panther movie and maybe made a name or origin story instead of the treatment he got. I mean, he seems to have a rich backstory, but I think it feels rushed. An origin story would have given the guy time to grow and the audience would have time to actually get to know him, you know, provided they don't fuck it up. Then, when they eventually make the second Black Panther movie, they should recast T'Challa. I mean, some people would be upset, yeah, but you know what? People are upset now. By holding off on a sequel, the actors would have had time to grieve in private where it's appropriate. Because the part of the film when they talk about T'Challa was the only part in the film that felt real. And those moments felt real because they were. The actors weren't acting, and it's really obvious when you see the rest of the film. It feels uncomfortable, man. Like, I'm being made privy to something that's none of my business when all I wanted was some entertainment. At some point, they say that T'Challa suffered in silence. Well, no, that's bollocks. Chadwick Boseman suffered in silence. T'Challa is a fictional character, and by saying he suffered in silence, they totally ruined the character of Black Panther. T'Challa's character knew the mantle of Black Panther was his responsibility in order to protect the people of Wakanda. And he seems like the type of guy who loved his sister. So him not making sure he lives longer so he can be around to be a protector doesn't add up. By recasting T'Challa, the audience would have had the opportunity to say a real goodbye and had a really nice passing of the torch if they really need the princess to be the new Black Panther. They talk about the fact that T'Challa's dead and how it made them feel, but everything else they did just kind of taints his legacy. The trade agreements he apparently started at the end of the last movie have been reneged. They made it so he abandoned his family and all the people of Wakanda that he had the responsibility of protecting. They really shouldn't have used Chadwick's death as a vehicle for feel points in this mediocre movie. It felt manipulative, and I felt a sense of unease watching it. I'd also like to say that I don't blame any of the actors for this, by the way. I'm putting it entirely on the writers. I mean, if they were going to do this, they could have done it right, but they didn't. I understand they wanted to pay respects to Chadwick, but to incorporate his death into a comic book movie is just feels like the writers lacked imagination. By the way, what's the deal with writers trying to incorporate real world stuff and trying to make statements about real life in works of fiction? Especially ones that are supposed to be entertaining. You know, I reckon that South Park episode about our imagination being under attack might be onto something. Actually, the South Park Imagination Land episodes is something I probably should have watched instead of this. And again, I can't stress this enough. They really, really, really should have considered recasting Chadwick. This isn't a fresh take, I know, but there's so much talent out there that they could have done it. But apparently, the age of men is over, so it kind of felt like they took the opportunity for a replacement that wasn't completely ready yet. They could have even recast T'Challa and stayed progressive if they really wanted to. How? By casting RuPaul as Black Panther, of course. He's even recorded a soundtrack already. I don't know, might have been more fun. Musically, it's already better than what we got. And the costume designs would have been serving some kind of fish, realness, house down boots. Gag. Hell, she could have told T'Challa's coffin to sashay away and it would have been more respectful than what we ended up with. I just can't believe a movie with so many black people lacks so much seasoning. But hey, Kevin Smith cried, so that's something. Anyway, let me know what you think of the video and what you think of the movie. And if, you know, I'm wrong on any aspect, it's YouTube, so I'm sure you'll tell me. I'm not really into comics either, and I guess this was a kind of a normie review. So, either way, I hope you enjoyed the video because this was therapy for me. Anyway, till next time.
Say